Welcome back to yet another tier list. We've seen the release of set 16 in Vanguard Zero Global, and we've got Bermuda, Pale Moon, Dimension Police, and Aquaforce to cover. So, in terms of the set, overall, pretty sleeper, beyond, except for Pale Moon, obviously. Pale Moon's the biggest winner out of the set. Venus, Luquier, and Zelma have been released, and it's a huge boost to Silverthorn's power level. Their consistency is still the same, but its power level is it's through the roof. So, let's get straight into it. As usual, we'll be going by nation order, then by clan. So, starting it off, United Sanctuary. So, Jewel Knights, still solid tier 2 deck. It's pretty much all pure now, like there is no Blast Blade variants. Sanctuary of Light does pop up a little bit in Royals as well. Jewel Knights is a really consistent deck, like Miranda definitely helps sort of search those PGs. The front row retire of Ashley Reverse is really good as well. Moving on to Oracles. Again, really good, like, tournament deck, not a very good ladder deck. Then Raging Form, Shadows. So Revengers have sort of dipped off the face of the earth, basically. Like, very little people play them now. It's old. It's not as good. Like, its main power turn is in its break right turn, and even the power level of that turn isn't even that high compared to other decks now. So I guess push down to tier 2 solidly now. It's not even a consideration. It's definitely just tier 2. But we'll have to see how it goes with set 17 with release of like stuff like Bloodmaster and Drag Ruler. See if people can reinvent the deck a bit. But moving on, we've now got Gold Paladin. We'll start off with Ezel, because Gold Paladin does have two separate builds which are pretty consistently supported, one of which being Ezel. I would put this above Raging Form. I think its consistency and just like ease of play in ranked is what puts it at tier 2 for me. Like, you get yourself to like 2-3 damage by the time you write Ezel Scissors, whack down a self damager, put yourself up to 4, start using the scissors and getting crits. It's really good, really easy and really fast, and that's what you want in ranked. If you're doing the rank grind, you want really easy, fast games. Speaking of easy, Liberators. So Liberators is still tier 1. It's still like one of the best decks of the format, but I think it's been knocked out of the best deck spot personally. So it's good because returning heal, recyclable Blaster Blade, Liberate in a retirement, and unflipping Balon. Really solid deck, but I don't think it's quite the best deck anymore. We'll see how it goes next set though, set 17. But moving on to Angel Feather. Celestials is the main build of Angel Feather, and it's a pretty good rogue deck. Like, it's really, I've seen it being played. It's really fun, and I think if you've got the opportunity to build it, you should give it a go. It's definitely decent. Hop onto some Discord servers, ask for some builds, and find out how to play it. Now, Minerva. Minerva's a bit of a dark horse. I think Minerva did a lot better in Global than it did in JP, like in terms of representation in ladder, and I think that's because Global are a bunch of simps. Global players are a bunch of simps. They love Minerva. Like, people in the West love Minerva so much. So I think it got played a lot more because of that, as well as it just being a decent deck. Like, Witch of Oranges, Grapes, and the starter Soul Charging non-triggers is really good for deck thinning. And then you've got Angelica, which Soul Blasts the oranges, grapes that you were riding throughout the game to then give you cards in hand to then feed Minerva, which then Soul Blasts the Chamomiles and other stuff to restand and swing again. So it's a 6 attack turn, 4 of which are into the Vanguard, and they mostly scale for the most part, which is really cool. Like, it's a really good, consistent deck, and it's not got much of an issue. I've been playing it on stream. It's just really fun. It's a really good deck. I really do recommend. So because of that, I'm going to put it above Raging Form, but below Ezel. I think it's a little bit harder to play in the case of just sort of knowing when to push, and like it's not as consistent. Like, it can sometimes break and just not get very good soul charge. Like, if you don't soul charge Chamomiles, you're basically not like comboing off. But moving on to Kagero with Nouvelle. Nouvelle Dauntless Drive is like the main build of Kagero. Like, I'd put these at a tier 1. Still a very decent, consistent deck. Like, it's got, whenever you play this deck, you know what you're doing basically every game with very little variance. Dauntless Drive now being a discard 2. I think that came in the last set. Just sort of ups the consistency and like makes it a little bit better. The extra card can matter. The extra card sometimes is a PG. So, and then moving on to Narukami. Narukami, unfortunately, is going to be about the same space as Raging Form. I think a little bit lower because it's just not as good anymore. Like, you've got Liberators, which are one of the best decks, which are on Garmor, which just turn off half of your deck's like mechanic, and on top of that, like, Descendant just isn't as good a finisher anymore. So, and also it's old. That's just how card games go. The old decks don't get played. So unfortunately, You know, narukami does sit in the middle of tier 2 and it's going lower and lower every list. But then moving on to some clan events. So we got Tachikaze, cool deck. Still just sort of, I think this gets pushed down to tier 4, just sort of, not because it's like the worst deck in the game, right? I don't think any deck in the game is the worst deck in the game anymore. Because that used to be Megconian, but we've got a clan event, so we've got to talk about that later. But I don't think there's any like bad deck. I think every deck functions. The difference is, some decks, you know, function to a much higher level. You know, Tachikaze's deck that functions and can do some pretty cool stuff, but like its power level is very low compared to like, you know, tier 1, tier 2 decks. So that's why it's down here in tier 4. And then we've got Hayaki Vogue Reverse, or just Murakumo in general. Now there are different ways to play Murakumo. Like I think you can play a control variant with Shuyukis and Mandala Lords, or you can play a more of aggressive version with the Ride Chain with the Magatsu Storm. Hayaki Vogue Reverse I think is cool. Right, you can call obviously Hayaki Vogues to the back row, lock your 2 front row intercepts, so you grade 2 grade 2s in the front row to give them 10k, swing 3 attacks for 21, or even 4 I think, potentially. But unfortunately, like, it's just not that good. Like, it's cool, it's just not good. So I think this gets lumped in at a low tier 3, because I think the Mangatsu Storm, like, rush, early rush, still sort of keeps it up there a little bit. Keeps it out of tier 4, but yeah. And then Nubatama, I think Nubatama is probably about the same, to be honest. Like, it's got some good options, but its resource management is pretty low. Like, it does kind of like run out of Soul Blast pretty easily. If it had a card that was like on play Soul Charge 1, that would go a long way for it. I guess technically Fuki is like that, but that also requires Counter Blast. So I think Nubatama is like something to keep an eye on if they get like ways to Soul Charge. And then Reggie, Dark Regulars. This is solidly tier 3 now. No one plays it. You know, Reggie was like the best deck in the format when it had its like, you know, non-limit break, 15 soul, 3 crit. And that's because you just sat them on free. You just sat them on free and you kept them there. And obviously the most decks in the format were break red deck. Just had like, you know, their hand in the pants and like, well fuck, you know, what am I gonna do? But once they made Reggie limit break, it just kind of like is dropped off. Like, getting 15 soul is consistent, but then you have to play like if you want to do the damage, if you want to do this like the damage denial build of it, you have to then play like self damages, and then playing self damages means you're playing less like bikes and chariots or like Ammon's followers to like actually soul charge. So it just kind of dropped off. Then we've got Spike Brothers. This is a weird one. No one plays it, but I feel like it's still very good. I feel like its combo turn is still a very good turn. So I would probably put this above. I'd probably put this above Eradicators. I think its break right turn is a lot better than Eradicators. But I think partially due to it being a clan event, and also like, you know, not ending on no front row, meaning if you didn't win that turn, you probably lost the game. I think like that puts it around mid tier 2, so around this area. Like some of these decks are kind of like around this area. I think the only tier that I make that is like done by which deck is better is tier 1. You know, tier 1 is like left to right, best to worst. And then this set's biggest winner, Silverthorn. I think this is the best deck at the moment. I think in the right hands, this deck is a monster. I think it's insanely consistent with like what it can do because it's got so many cards of Soul Charge and selective Soul Charging as well. Its power, like Mari, I can't say this full name, itself can take care of double intercept itself. You know, if just one extra Marian Soul, that's double intercept taken care of, and now you've still got 3 attacks into the Vanguard. And they're scaling as well. And you've also got Ava as their break ride, which can give you an extra 2 attacks, which is just more sort of pressure on the Vanguard. It's just insane what this deck can do in the right hands. Like, I've been playing on the stream, I misplay a lot of it, it's very complicated. Like doing a turn, doing a turn isn't that hard. Until you have the timer in. Yeah, you've got like a, what, is it like a minute and a half? To decide, okay, so I gotta do this, so I go, cool Mari, cool this, okay, cool this, and then I can put that in to take this out, which boosts this up, and I can call this, attack this, which then lets me call like, it's a lot of things to think about in a minute and a half. So anyone who can play this deck consistently well, props to you, because I think it's the best deck in the format. So moving on to Stargate with Nova Grappler. So Blouse is a deck that I think is still tier 1. I think it's like the low, like Nova's to me has always been like the bottom of tier 1 because its break right turn is so good. You know, we haven't had to worry about Ashura Kaiser in Global. Ashura Kaiser was never a deck. It got killed before it even lived in Global, which is good. That deck was disgusting. Nova Grapple has always been a deck that, like, to me, is like the bottom of tier 1, because its break ride turn is always really powerful, but like getting there can sometimes like be a struggle. Like, if you get rushed, or if you don't get the break ride, your plan sort of falls apart. Then we've got Link Joker. So I think this is tier 2. I don't know. I think Link Joker is tier 2. I think I'd put it sort of around here-ish, because it's good, it's consistent, but it's a control deck. It's a deck that relies more on like controlling the flow of the game, and managing your resources to ensure that you just get consistent turns, consistent attacks into Vanguard, and you limit what they can do. Now, so you've got decks like Pale Moon, who can clear their front row before your turn, so you can't lock them. You've got decks like Gold Paladin, Ezel and Liberators, who both run unlockers. Liberators gets even better at this when they get Monarch Sanctuary Alfred, which absolutely just destroys Link Joker. Nouvelle, Kagero is just Vanguard centric. Yeah, so I'd put it like high tier 2. It's a control deck, and control decks aren't that popular in Vanguard Zero, I don't find. Then moving on to Dimension Police, with like Robos mainly. Tier 3, not really changed. Not really much to say here. It didn't get much of a boost from the set. No one cares. It's just sorry, different fight. It's not a very popular deck. Then moving on to Aquaforce. Now, this deck has been like a tier 2 deck to me for so long, but I think it's dropped off. I think it's tier 3 now. Maelstrom Reverse is a nice card. Lock 1, when it attacks with the 4th attack, gain 5 and a crit, and then at the end of battle retire something. To me, that card screams good, but it just doesn't. Like, I think we've got a lot of cross rides in the game, a lot of 13k like bases now. And I think because of that, like, you're not hitting with Basil or Diamantes as often. And because you're not hitting with those, it means you're not getting 2 hits into Vanguard through double intercept. And because you're not getting 2 attacks into Vanguard, you're just losing a lot of pressure. So I think this is like bottom of tier 2, top of tier 3. I think at the moment I'm going to put it at tier 3. Like top of tier 3. Because I think it's just not got that oomph it used to have. Which saddens me. It was one of my favourite decks to play in Zero, but it's just not as good anymore. Then Bermuda. Duos. I'll be honest, no real clue what this deck does. It bounces, adds copies, discards them for costs, restands a Vanguard. Not seen it played, it's not very popular. I think this is probably like... I think Duos does help with making Bermuda sort of function more like it wants to, Roan and a PG is a cool little combo, you can hit Vanguard of Roan, bounce the PG to hand, and add another one from deck. That's kind of cool. But I think, like, discarding multiple copies isn't as good in Zero because you don't have as many cards to have the copies of. You're working with a 30-card deck, and the grade 3s you never want to add to hand with Roan because they're grade 3s. They're triggers. So I think this is probably like tier 3 as well, like probably high tier 3 mixed with Aquaforce, just because like it functions, but it doesn't function as well as like the other decks in tier 2. Then Grand Blue, same as Takaze, it functions, doesn't function very well. Neonectar. Now Neonectar is a deck that I do have a little bit of bias on because I do play a lot, but I do think it's very decent, especially with Elvira. I think Elvira is the main piece of Musketeers that like a Neonectar that makes it a good functioning deck. Because you just get crits pretty much free. Self-damage yourself, unflip with the grade 2, and then hit for crits for like free crits pretty easily. Deck thinning gets rid of those non-triggers, so you can get those heal triggers out. I think this is the best tier 3 deck, I'd say, because it functions the most competently. It knows what it wants to do, and it gets that game plan every game. Like, it's really consistent, but it's not quite as powerful as a tier 2 decks, because it does run out of canvas pretty fast. Then we've got Grey Nature. This is on the lower end of tier 3 decks. It functions, but like what it does is just draw cards, and that isn't good in Zero. Like, that was good in normal TCG, because those are guard value, but Zero is just card draw is not that good. And now we've got the clan event for this set, Meg Colony. Meg Colony got a big boost. It got its grade 3s now. They basically all say this unit can ignore paralyzed units intercept, which is cool. The downside is that it's only on grade 3s. So if you want to get like multiple attacks into the Vanguard, it means you're calling grade 3s. But that's pretty good when your opponent's on 5 damage. You paralyze both both front row intercepts, and then just swing 3 times into Vanguard with 11k bases. We'll have to see how it sort of pans out. We've seen a couple people play it. I think it definitely functions better than it used to. Like, the fact that this is now like functioning means that tier 4 is no longer a tier of just decks that don't function. It's now just sort of like the least played and, you know, sort of worst decks. So I think, where would I put this? This is sort of preliminary because I haven't seen this played much. I'm gonna put this as sort of like, it's low tier 3, I think. I don't know, actually. I think I'd probably put it above these two. I don't know. The clan events are all weird because, like, you don't see the clan events very often because they're clan events. People don't have access to them. But I think we'll put it there for now. So, do I think this is like generally correct? I think tier 1 and 2 are correct. I think the places where I put my tier 1 and 2 decks are correct. I think it's tier 3 and tier 4 where it gets debated, because these are tier 3 and tier 4 are the decks that don't see play, and we just don't know what they do. Like, we don't know what they can do. But that was the tier list. So let me know in the comments what you think. You know, do you think I've put Mega way lower than it should be? Do you think I've put, you know, liberators way high? I mean, I don't think you think that, but feel free to tell me in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps me out, you know. And don't forget to check me out on Twitch, where I stream mostly Monday to Friday. Mostly Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I do sometimes miss them, but join the Discord and you will see. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.